Happy Tuesday, everybody. Welcome into another edition of Daily Faceoff Live. We are streaming live on the DFO YouTube, looking for your inbox questions for later on. As always, we are a presentation of Bet365. Download the app today. Use the promo code NATION, whatever the moment. It's never ordinary at Bet365. A Remembrance Day or Veterans Day edition of the show today. So no matter what side of the border you're on, important to remember the sacrifices that those who served made and those who continue to serve will make in the future. As I bring in my co-host, Carter Hutton. Huts, how you doing on a Tuesday morning?
I'm doing well, buddy. You know what I mean? A little bit of snow on the ground this morning on this Remembrance Day here in Thunder Bay. So it was nice dropping the kids off at school, though. They were pumped about some snow, and they had a big assembly. So it's good. You know, obviously I had my grandfather was in the war and my wife's grandfather. So it hits close to home here. There was a big event going on. So it's always a great day here in Canada.
I didn't know that. Very cool. Yeah, Remembrance Day. Everyone in the chat, again, looking for your inbox questions. Jeff Marek is going to join us for our big segment a little bit later on. But let's start. We're going to talk about a whole bunch of things. And obviously, title of the show, 2026 Hall of Fame class, on the heels of last night in the league, the 2025 Hall of Fame induction. Some viral moments from that we'll touch on later as well. But let's kick things off, Huts, with a little bit of talk about what we saw in the NHL last night. And as I look back at a couple of results around the league, the line of, deserves got nothing to do with it, that kind of popped into my head. You have the New York Rangers finally getting off the schneid at home. They score 6 on the Nashville Predators, despite putting up just 18 shots. But for the Rangers, it's their first win at Madison Square Garden. Huts, they were the last team in the NHL to not have a win on home ice this season.
Yeah, it was about time. You know, like it felt like it was going to pop, right? It almost felt like they needed to get one and then it was going to go off. And I think that man right there was a big reason for it. You know, Panarin played well last night. He found the back of the net twice. Lafreniere, who I thought, it felt like he was coming into his own the last few seasons, right? Like he was becoming a superstar. And then there was a big drop off, right? I thought he was really good last night as well. And, you know, when I look at who they played, I just think the Nashville Predators are struggling. I don't really know if they have an identity. We talked a little bit before about how poorly UC Saros plays. I know they're on a plane now headed to the Global Series. So I don't know if that has a little bit of effect on it. You know, you're kind of excited to get going and you start to overlook the game at hand. But that being said, the Rangers needed to find a way to win, and the Nashville Predators were the victim, you know, scoring 6. I thought Shesterkin was good early in this game. I thought in the first period, the shots were a little bit lopsided for the Preds, which I'm going to get into later because that was just a great heads up bet by me, but I don't want to foreshadow too much into it. But, you know, for this Rangers team, it's just something to go on. You know, they've obviously found a way to win on the road, which is important. Now you got to find that identity at home, and hopefully this will be a step in the right direction because I know their fans are worried. And the Devils lost last night at home. The Rangers won at home. Everything's reversed, and it's still a lot of hockey to go here, Ty.
It's a rough stat line for UC Saros in Nashville, who allows 5 goals on just 12 shots last night. You go back and you look at the goals, and, you know, none of them were, like, terrible. Like, I don't think he had a bad game. He faced a ton. Like, out of those 12 shots he faced, Huts, I think, like, 9 of them were from high-danger areas. Like, does any goalie in the league face more pressure than UC Saros with the way that Predators team defends in front of him? Like, if he doesn't stand on his head, they have no hope in hell of winning.
Yeah, that is the tough part too. And again, we talked about that yesterday. We got into it with Kevin Woodley from In Goal Magazine, just about how the stats, you know, and what matters, right? We talked about Calvin Pickard, his numbers when he's protected. UC Saros is not protected in that. And I don't care how good you are, there is a factor that comes into play when you are just overexposed at UC size, right? He is the guy that needs to see the puck to save the puck. He doesn't have the advantage of being 6'4", 6'5", where there is a skill set involved in that of just filling space. And I thought last night was a great example of the chaos in the D zone. There was a lot of times where pucks would go low to high last night, and you could see the Nashville Predators were just in the blender. And it wasn't about just protecting, keeping teams to the outside. They were giving up the middle of the ice, which makes it even tougher for a goalie when you're trying to play a bit of a predictable style of hockey. So they got their work cut out for them with what's going on in Nashville. And that being said, hopefully this Global Series will be a step in the right direction for them, getting away, having a chance to bond. But last night was thoroughly disappointing for the Preds.
The other team that was off the schneid last night, and we have a big segment coming tomorrow with Steve Peters. He's going to give us a film breakdown of why the Oilers are struggling the way they are at 5-on-5. But, man, Edmonton did not deserve that hockey game against Columbus, but they got 2 world-class goals from Connor McDavid, a lucky bounce, some timely saves from Stuart Skinner. And, I mean, Stuart Skinner, that's about the best-looking .789 save percentage game I think I've ever seen. He stopped a couple of great opportunities big one in OT. So the Oilers as well, after the 9-1 drubbing on the weekend, they got in the win column.
Yeah, it felt like almost a must win. I don't know how you felt. Obviously, you're a little closer to the action with, being in Edmonton, being with Oilers Nation. Again, I didn't get a chance to watch the game live, but running through the highlights this morning, like some timely saves. And again, you have a world-class player like Connor McDavid puts his team on the back, and that's a lucky balance, right? You talk about the tying goal shorthanded. Wallman's just trying to center it, force it over to Leon Draisaitl. It goes off a stick and in. But those are the breaks you get, right? If you're playing good hockey and you're generating, bounces go your way. And that might just be one that starts to turn the tide a little bit in Edmonton.
Yeah, I think that's kind of what they're hoping is it gives them a little bit of life moving forward. They're back on an Eastern road trip now to conclude their weekend. But let's talk a bit of a couple of off-ice topics, Huts. The class of 2025 inducted last night officially in Toronto, and that means we can turn our attention to who could get the call to the Hall next season. On the newcomers to the Hall of Fame ballot, Patrice Bergeron is the headliner. Listen, he's won at every level. He's a member of the Triple Gold Club. 6-time Selke winner, 84th all-time in points. Even though his game is way more known for the defensive side of the puck, he's still one of only 101 players in the history of the sport to hit the 1,000-point mark in his career. I think Bergeron is a lock. I mean, who am I to sit here and say who is and isn't a Hall of Fame lock? But I like Bergeron's chances of getting in a lot more than maybe guys like Phil Kessel and Eric Stahl, who are also hitting the ballot for the first time.
Yeah, I think Bergeron, just his leadership too, even at the international level and what he's done with the Bruins. I guess looking at it now, part of me is like almost I wish Chara was 1 year pushed back and they could have went in together, which would have been very unique, I think, for Bruins fans, for everyone. But, I think just what he meant to this organization, what he's built with that Stanley Cup run when they beat the Canucks. And then along the lines, like how many good seasons did they have as a team? He's been so successful there. I think every year it was always like the Patrice Bergeron injury report when the playoffs ended, right? I always felt that way. It was always so funny when you would hear what he was playing with. Guy is a warrior, and I think that set the table for a lot of younger players in this league to play that style of play. And I think when guys are trying to make the NHL skill is their skill, but how many times you hear about just defending like the way Patrice Bergeron did, right? We hear that all the time. We compare a lot of players in this league to the way Bergeron played, which is so important. So I think he was that kind of template for that all-around centerman you wanted on your team.
And then who else could round out the class? I mean, I mentioned quickly Kessel and Stahl, first-time eligible. I thought Carey Price was going to get in on his first attempt. I think he should probably get in on the second one. I think, one of the best goalies of his generation, a guy who didn't win at the NHL level, but won pretty much everywhere else. I think back to that 2014 Sochi performance for Team Canada and just how good he was in that tournament. Like his goals against average was like under 1. It was insane. So Carey Price, I think, has a great shot of going in next to Bergeron. And then there's kind of a whole slew of guys who I think are, I don't know, they're pretty close. I'm no hockey historian, but Ryan Getzlaf doesn't have individual awards, but again, he won a lot with Team Canada. Patrick Marleau is the all-time games played leader in the NHL. Again, not a lot of individual accolades, but he was on some good international teams. Curtis Joseph is a name that a lot of goalie people want to see get in. Henrik Zetterberg's got a great case. Where does Keith Tkachuk fall? Does he finally get the call? Like, is there anyone else, as you look at a few other names that I rattle off, that you'd like to see get in?
I guess when you think about some of these guys, right, I obviously Eric Stahl, I'm a bit biased to a Thunder Bay boy. He won a cup. He's won at every level, which is unbelievable to Ryan Getzlaf. But it's you start to think if there isn't a sure thing, Ty, do we start to backdate it a little bit? Do we start to go to guys that aren't first Hall of Famers where, I think Bergeron is the guy, right? When you think of, who should be in first, but now those other guys have good numbers. They've been there outside of Carey Price. Then you start to look back a little bit. Maybe you start to go back to a Zetterberg because these other guys are still available. How long do you let them wait? So it is tricky. It was nice to see McGillney go in this year. I saw a little video of him having a shot of vodka, I think he said, at 3 a.m. when he found out. So, I think it's unique. And I do think there is players that are due to get in. It's just the fact that are we going to force someone in just because they're more of a newer name and they're fresh? So I think that's where the tough decisions have to be made. And I'm glad it's not us, my man.
We'll talk about Hall of Fame gripes with Jeff Marek maybe, but this is one of those points where I kind of wish it was done maybe not totally like baseball, but more like baseball where like, hey, if there's not 5 guys that you deem as Hall of Fame worthy, just don't put in 4
Yeah.
guys. Like, just Bergeron and Price, and like, hey, if that's the class, then like, okay, they get a special moment. It's a more intimate class. Like, I don't really see a big deal with that. Not really the way the Hall operates, though. But again, we'll have more on that with Jeff Marek. I want to talk a little bit of Olympics. I mean, hey, we just rattled off a whole bunch of guys: Getzlav, Price. I mean, Bergeron, people who were big parts of some Canadian Olympic winning rosters. So let's talk about the group that could be heading to Milan. Obviously, the Bedard v. Celebrini conversation. And is it even Bedard or Celebrini? Is it Bedard and Celebrini? Is it possible that Canada takes neither of them? It's a question of just how young Canada will get. So we each have a couple of predictions that we've laid out. I'm going to say Celebrini gets on and Bedard doesn't. I think they'll view him as a bit more of a versatile piece. Do you think they'll both get on, or do you just have one?
No, I do. I just don't know if Bedard fits well in that bottom 6. If that's the role he's going to play. Because as I look at the top lineup, who does he bump out if he's going to play the minutes he needs to play to have success? But then what I am concerned with is if Bedard gets bumped down the lineup and he has to play in more of a checking role, is he ready to do that, right? Where I think Macklin Celebrini's game consistently every night doesn't really need to change a lot, right? Because we see that on a every night basis with Celebrini, how he can play all around the puck. He checks hard. He does it also. It doesn't really change his game. So he is the guy for me. The other player that I think now is making his pitch, right? I look at Brad Marchand. He just got his 11th goal last night. And this is in a world where, yes, he played in the Four Nations Cup, and we've talked about, he's older, but he is a guy that can play in those tough situations, minimal minutes, and still be productive when we talk about Sam Bennett dropping off. And there's going to be some tough choices, right? We talk about Mark Scheifele coming in if he's going to be the guy that, makes that fit. So there's a lot of tough decisions to be made. I guess the good thing is now you could start to analyze, what is Team USA doing? What are the other teams doing? How do you match up well? Because it's great to make an all-star team, but at the end of the day, you're going to have to build a team that is going to win under these circumstances.
Yeah, like it'd be really easy to just look at the points leaderboard and, rattle
100%.
off the first 12 forwards and be like, let's take the best guys. I wonder about a guy like Nick Suzuki personally. I mean, we talk about getting younger, but is there a decision of like, all right, Suzuki or Scheifele, which one do you like? Do you want to go with a bit of a younger option? Speaking of points, he is 10th or tied for 9th, I believe, amongst Canadian forwards in points. He's a guy who can give you a bit of a 200-foot game as well. Like, I wonder about Nick Suzuki's chances of making it. Like, that's a guy who I think you can slot as a 4th-line center, maybe move a Celebrini to the wing and like start to build out a pretty unique bottom 6.
Yeah, I think Suzuki, too, what he brings to the table is his ability to make plays, right? I heard a comment the other day from Martin St. Louis saying that if Nick Suzuki played with Nick Suzuki, he'd score 40 goals every year, right? Which I think is a great way to put it. Like, you just don't realize how good he is at times because he gets a bit I don't think overshadowed is the word, but I just think there's more flair to Cole Caulfield's game. You have Demidov there. You have Hudson, who are like these guys that are like fancy, right? They're the modern. They're skating. They're moving. They're dangling. Where Nick Suzuki is more of your predictable player. And these are players that coaches love, right? When I say that, you think about the predictability in their game. You know what you're getting every single night from a player like Nick Suzuki. And I think there's value there in the fact that he's a little younger. He can skate. He can keep up. So he's never really going to get in a matchup where he is a little slow of foot, where that's where I worry, right? I think last year watching Mark Stone at times during that Four Nations Cup, it's like, does he have the speed to keep up with what they're going to match? Because right now you got to think USA is going to be heavy with skill, heavy with speed. Now, how do you match that, right? Yes, you need experience, but at the same time, if you're slow, you're going to get chewed up in the Olympics.
Yeah, and I like when you talked about Suzuki and the word predictable. We have to remember, like, short tournament chemistry, like having a guy like that who is easy to play with. Like you said, coaches love him, line mates love him, right? Like, you know exactly what he's going to do. I wonder if that's not a factor into all of this. Quickly, before we get to Jeff Marek, on the goaltending front, I really wanted to come here with like a passionate hot take and say Jordan Binnington will be the only goalie from that Four Nations team that makes it back. I don't know how much I truly believe it. I feel like Hockey Canada, they'll go with at least him and Aiden Hill and keep one spot up for grabs. But if I was the one making the call, it would be Binnington, Thompson, Blackwood. Those would be the 3. You think about familiarity. Blackwood's been playing behind Cale Makar and Devon Taves. Like, there's some familiarity there if you wanted it. That's who I would take. I just think they're going to keep Aiden Hill on the roster, assuming he's healthy.
You know what? I just don't know if there's enough time for Blackwood to get enough games in. That's my only concern with Mackenzie Blackwood, right? Coming off of injuries, only played a couple games. I do think he has the skill set and the size and athletic ability to be that difference maker. But it is, for me, it's Jordan Binnington on merit alone, right? Like right now, it hasn't been a good year for him.
Sure.
But between the ears in the big moment, it's hard to argue that he's not the guy. But right now, I feel like it's Logan Thompson's job to lose.
Yes.
Like he feels like he is the guy. He's got the size. He's got the capability. He played well in the playoffs last year. His numbers are through the roof. And this is a guy that we talked about yesterday. He gets a lot of scoring chances against, and he seems to manage it well. So I do think you go into camp with that scenario. I just don't understand how. I think last year Montembeault was there as the younger guy, hoping to groom him and have him ready. Like if he could start to grow into it. But right now, it's not about like. This isn't like you have Connor Hellebuck, Jake Ottinger, so your third could be anybody, right? Literally, you could have anybody. You have 2 stars. In Canada, we have to have 3 guys that are ready to play and ready to go because we don't have a outright number 1 guy. You need to find someone who's hot at the right time. So that's where I think you need to find someone that is capable, going. Binnington gets on merit, and I think the other 2 are new guys because I don't know if Aiden Hill is ready to go coming out of that injury either.
Yeah, again, that's what I would do. I guess we'll see how Hockey Canada decides to play it. Let's get to our big segment for the day. Jeff Marek from The Sheet, and it's brought to you by Uber Eats, enabling fans to maximize their fandom all season long with exclusive game day deals on the app. From game day eats to paper plates if you're hosting, to all the ingredients you need for your go-to game day dip. Before, during, or after the game, Uber Eats is assisting every hockey fan's experience all season long. Always a pleasure to be joined by our friend Jeff Marek, as we are every Tuesday. How's it going, Jeff?
Good. Skill adapts. So just picking up on your last conversation about Team Canada and the Olympics, after 2006, which was an absolute unmitigated disaster for Team Canada, the philosophy changed to skill adapts. That's all you heard out of Hockey Canada. And it was the right thing to do. Just get the best collection of players and understand that no matter what their position is on their NHL team, if you're a skilled player, you can adapt. Whenever Hockey Canada seems to stray from that philosophy, they get in trouble. But as long as hockey keeping its eyes on the idea that skill can adapt, Hockey Canada tends to be fine. We tend to get in our own way about hockey here in Canada, guys, as I'm sure everybody has noticed here and overthink. I always think back to 2006 and just skill adapts. Take the best collection of players who are adaptable to every situation, which is why I'll go back to a previous point too. I would take Macklin Celebrini over Connor Bedard. There's a skill that translates in all 3 zones for Macklin Celebrini that hasn't translated yet for Connor Bedard. Not saying he's not an elite offensive force. Clearly he is. Whenever you say something nice about Celebrini, I almost like you have to apologize for Bedard. But just Celebrini is more of a complete player who could adapt in more zones than Bedard can.
Do you think there's a chance they take them both? And then also, where does Matthew Schaefer enter into the conversation?
Boy, so the only thing about Schaefer is there the track record, and at what point does Matthew Schaefer hit the wall? Let's not forget, like, he basically didn't play hockey last year. Like, is there going to be a wall that Matthew Schaefer hits this year in the NHL just based on he hasn't played hockey? He hasn't played a lot of hockey. Now, he's jumped over every hurdle they placed in front of him in the NHL. Whenever we talk about, Leo Carlsson and Celebrini and Bedard and all these young stars, I always go out of my way and say, hey, don't forget about Matthew Schaefer as well, as far as being like that next, that next superstar or, young player at a key position here. My head right now says no to Matthew Schaefer, but my heart says yes. Like, I'm trying to will this into existence the more that I try to talk about Matthew Schaefer, knowing full well that Canada does like to bring 1, maybe 2 younger players, not just for this round of the Olympics, but for what's going to happen 4 years from now. And they want to give them that experience. Greeny, to me, seems as close to being that young guy that's going to make it. But I do wonder about Schaefer too. But if it's Schaefer, who are you leaving behind? Not that Canada has the most impressive blue line, but still, the thing about Hockey Canada is, and I can see them being concerned that there haven't been the games played yet for Schaefer. But would be fun. Would be fun.
Yeah,
Like, I know Doughty was 20 in 2010, but like by the end of the tournament, he's like Canada's best defenseman. There is a
I know.
precedent there.
It's that opportunity, right? Like it's tricky where I feel like I look at their forwards, it seems like the cupboard's full, right? It's going to be trickier decisions. And again, that's when I look at the back end and I look at the goalies, right? Which I touched on. Like, is there merit involved in this, Jeff? When you think of this team and you think of some of the guys that played well in the Four Nations Cup that aren't having good seasons, do they get in on that? Or is it, kind of what have you done for me lately? Because it is a what have you done for me lately kind of league. But this is such a unique unicorn where the pressure and what goes into it, if you don't have the experience, is that something you think Hockey Canada draws upon?
I think that's exactly right, Huts. I think you nailed it right there. A tournament like this, much like the Four Nations, just from a pressure point of view, is completely different than you're lighting it up in the NHL right now, and that's great. But playing in a situation like this, it's not apples to oranges. It's chalk to cheese. Like that's how different it is with this type of spotlight on you. So yeah, I think there'll be some. Well, you know what? He hasn't had, and we're thinking of like trying to think like Brandon Hagel, for example. We're probably thinking of here Sam Bennett as well would be another one. But based on what they did at Four Nations, I would think, and specifically when you start to look at chemistry, like, okay, who do you want Marner with? Like, how great did Marner look last year with Sam Bennett in Four Nations? That was like, it was a different style of center for Mitch Marner. And he didn't have to play fetch for this. It was the other way around. It was a center doing a lot of the work to get the puck to Mitch Marner. And he looked like a completely different player. So I think that does, like, I think this team is going to look a lot like we saw at the Four Nations with a couple of slight tweaks. You guys were talking about Nick Suzuki. When I think of skill adapts, as far as him being an offensive force and a defensive force as well, like that's the kind of guy that you're looking at. The problem is, again, this is where your heart's like, oh, it's breaking for this guy. Does it come at the expense of Mark Scheifele? That's the one that I think we all wonder about too. If there's a couple of new people coming in, who's for sure not going to be on the team, and that's where it gets even tougher, even though Scheifele's had a great start to the season.
Yeah, Scheifele has been tremendous. Turning our attention to the other thing Hutz and I were talking about, it's the Hall of Fame. Do you have a take on the 2026 class? Is there anyone you'd like to see get in? With Bergeron as a first-timer, does he deserve that sort of distinction as being a first ballot guy?
Yes. Yeah, I go Bergeron all day, all night. He's as close. Like I've always said, Nick Lidstrom was always considered, the perfect defenseman. I think the closest thing we've seen to a perfect forward is probably Patrice Bergeron. There are some guys that just make the game so easy to play. Ask anybody who's ever played with Bergeron, like how easy the game is to play when, he's not going to win the Art Ross, but he's a good offensive player, the best defensive player, maybe the best defensive forward the game has ever seen. And that covers a lot of ground. To me, he's going in right away. Like you look at that Stanley. I was making this point yesterday talking about Chara. There was a time there where you look at possession numbers where the Boston Bruins are having that season that led to the Stanley Cup. Like when Chara and Bergeron were on the ice together. And I do like your idea, by the way, Tyler, about it would have been nice if Chara and Bergeron would have gone in together. And there's one thing that I think of, like there were stretches in that season where the possession numbers were like, it was like 70%. Like when those two were on the ice, nobody else touched the puck. It was fun. We would watch Bruins games like, oh yeah, Chara's out there, Bergeron's out there. No one else is going to touch the puck. It was tremendous. Let me throw a name out at you. I've been stumping for this guy for a while because there's a couple of places that have historically been underrepresented by the Hockey Hall of Fame. One of them is goaltender. Now, the Hall has gone out of their way most recently, not so much this year, obviously, but to try to correct that. And we are seeing more goaltenders make it to the Hall of Fame recently. So they are very aware that that's an area of the game that is underrepresented in the Hall. So the goalie union's being recognized here, Huts. So you guys are good.
Love it.
It's on the radar for
Love
the
it.
Hall of Fame. It's cool. There's one area, though, that they still fall down, and that is defensive defensemen. That class is led by Rod Langway. I was glad to see Kevin Lowe get in there. But outside of those types of defensive defensemen, it really is a position that doesn't get the call at all. Unless you're putting up points as a D, you're not going to get there. And that's why I know this might be an unpopular take for some people, and it might be a name that people haven't really considered, but hear me out on this. In his era, the best defensive defenseman was surrounded by stars. He was never going to get a high, he was never going to get an accolade because of Forsberg and Sakic and Rob Blake and Patrick Waugh. I think Adam Foote belongs in the Hall of Fame, guys. Ooh. As far as being just a defensive, that's the thing, in the mold of, and there have been doors that have been open here for him with Kevin Lowe and Rod Langway. Those are the two obvious ones. How he was able to defend in Colorado's own zone, that opened up space for everybody else to be themselves. And from a goaltending point of view, Carter, you can speak with the most authority on this topic. As a goaltender, when you see that someone like Adam Foote is playing in front of you, how are you feeling about the game that night when you have someone 100%. Like that?
You know what, Jeff, I honestly think back to when I played in St. Louis with a player like Jay Bouwmeester and Alex Pietrangelo and these big, predictable defensemen and guys like that who are willing to block shots. They make the game so much easier for you, and I think it's so important. But so my question back to you would be, does this need to start with us having an award seasonally for the best defenseman? Because this has been an argument, right? We talk about the Norris, and it's always the guy who produces the most points. He might not be the best defensive defenseman, but it is something. Is it maybe something that we need to spotlight more throughout each year so it builds that road toward the Hall of Fame better?
I've always felt, yes, that there needs to be an offensive defenseman and a defensive defenseman. I just think that right now, and you see this with the Selke all the time, we can get there in a second. It's a position that's hard to measure, right? Like there are some that'll tell you that in his prime, Erik Karlsson was the best defensive defenseman. Why? Because they kept the puck in the offensive zone. And the best way to play defense is keep the puck out of your zone. Like it just stayed in, like blue line holds, offensive pressure, all of it. Like it was staying in there. And then there are others that want the Dan Girardi types where they're going to eat about 10 pucks every night, and the Jay McKees, speaking of old St. Louis Blues, the Jay McKees of the world that are they're playing defense and by laying down in front of pucks. I think it's a difficult conversation to have because again we come back to what is your job as a defenseman? Is it puck goes in, puck goes out? Is it points in the offensive zone? It's a combination of both. And the one guy who's going to accomplish all of this one day, who may have been the best player in the entire Four Nations tournament we just saw, what are we going to do when Jacob Slavin retires?
Yeah.
What are we going to do? Everybody knows he is one of the best defensemen in this era. And it was obvious. Like one of my favorite things to watch. Like next time you're watching the Carolina Hurricanes play, watch guys try to put the puck underneath his stick. It's freaking hilarious. Good luck. You do not get the puck under Jacob Slavin. It doesn't happen. It's one of the most fun things to watch. And even there's he's really smart with the puck. He's not like offensively gifted, but he's smart. Another one of my favorite things when Necas was there, watching them go into overtime. Aho, Necas, and Slavin were automatic. I know we all love watching Connor and Leon in the overtime, and that's true. Absolutely, 100%. I'm with everybody. But watching Slavin with Necas and Aho was special. It was as automatic as you're going to get. Again, I'll circle back to my defensive defenseman argument. What are we going to do when Slavin's up? Because we're not going to be able to point to numbers. Just like we're not going to be able to point to numbers with Adam Foote. Ask anybody on that Avalanche team that won cups how much Adam Foote meant to that Stanley Cup team. I know it's not a name that we hear a lot, but I just want to keep that one hot. I still think Adam Foote deserves some love here.
Again, just kind of looking through some of the numbers here, like he only received Norris votes in 2 of his seasons in the NHL. Never finished higher than 10th, but how much differently do we view him? And listen, I'm a victim of it as well. When Hutton and I were debating this earlier, I was like, oh, Marlowe, no individual accolades. Oh, Getzlav, no individual accolades. But how much differently do we view Slavin or Foote if it's like, oh, they were a 3-time defensive defenseman of the year?
Yeah.
Okay, I have a way to settle all this. I have a way to solve all this. Hockey has been described as the ultimate team sport. Is it time we do, basketball does this, is it time we put in teams in the hockey?
A whole team.
Individual hockey, it's the biggest team sport in the world. It's the best team sport in the world. Hall of Fame just for individuals, thankfully. Where's the area where we salute the great teams? of the world, either NHL, women's game, pick your league, international.
So I guess it for me would be, like say you talk about the Hawks, right? Someone I'm thinking about because of Duncan Keith, and you see Seabrook there, but then it's about that dynasty run. So then, like, do you get does a guy get in that was there for 1 year and played 40 games, right? Like I got friends because I was in that organization, right?
Yeah.
Or is it like a group of guys from a dynasty?
So no, I think it's like you pick the 1 year where that team is like the most dominant. And I'll tell you what, the one guy that I'm thinking of there, and I go back to my defensive defenseman thing. Man, we all love Duncan Keith and Brent Seabrook. Obviously, Brian Campbell, ditto. Ask any goaltender what it's like to have Nick Chalmers in them. When's the last time anyone talked about Nick Chalmerson? But ask any 100%. Goaltender, ask any coach, ask any partner, like, oh man, this guy's so good. You have no idea. And everyone in Edmonton now knows exactly how much Matthias Ekholm meant to the Nashville Predators, where it's like suppressing shots. Like he is where are you going to see that represented in the Hall of Fame? There is an easy way around it. Throw teams in. It's a team sport.
I like that.
Let's start nominating teams.
The sheet with Jeff Marek coming up at the top of the hour. Greg Wyshynski and Uffe Boden talking NHL Global Series with Uffe. That'll be a lot of fun. Have a good show, Jeff, and thanks for popping on.
That's going to be a lonely plane ride for the Preds. I'll tell you what. I remember when Tampa and New York were playing in Prague, and Shane O'Brien got scratched. I can't prove it. I wonder if he was traded on the flight, because as he arrived in Tampa, there was a plane waiting to go take him to Vancouver. Anywho, wonder if that happens with the Preds. Who's coming back?
All right, have a good show, Jeff.
Thanks
Jeff.
Speaking of the Preds, that was going to be the askDFO question, Huts, from our boy Joe, who said, back to Nashville, what shoe drops first, a coach firing or a big trade to shake up the room? He said, Carter, I know you've been there. What's going on? My advice, I think, to the Preds would be just stop doing shit for a while. Just like ride out the year and suck, and then make hard decisions in the summer.
Yeah, I think so too. Again, where they're at, it is what it is at this point. Again, I think Saros is a piece that could go, but after the askDFO trade, it makes it muddy for me. So I think the coach is next, because like you're not going to fire Barry Trotz, right? It's Barry Trotz. You're going to just kind of let him gently take over or field someone else into it. That being said, it's okay to try to find their identity here, but it's been tough to watch, that's for sure.
Let's get to our daily bets, brought to you by Bet365. Download the app today. Use the promo code NATION, whatever the moment. It's never ordinary at Bet365. Oh, another +3 units for me yesterday. Thank you very much, Ivan Barbashev. Huts, you're a winner as well. Look at us go.
Yeah, we're hot, baby. That was it. I knew it. The Preds were just going to get a bunch of shots, get blown out. Then they're probably playing cards on the plane right now, going overseas. What a night.
Pat, your heater from last week, it's over.
I'm falling off a little. I mean, McDavid, 2 goals, just neither of them on the power play, unfortunately. So I got a little too greedy on this one.
All right, picks for tonight. As I do, I'm taking shot props. I got a couple of guys whose numbers I really like. One of them is Jonathan Huberdeau. The line is set at 2. He has hit this in 9 of 12 and 5 in a row. The other one is Kent Johnson in Columbus. He's hit this in 11 of 15 this year, but is coming off a miss last night in the game against the Oilers. So Huberdeau, 9 of 12. Johnson, 11 of 15. I like both these guys, and I'm getting it at north of +200. Pat, what do you like?
Yeah, I finally got the right board up here. I'm getting a little greedy again today. I was going to do just these separate. Rupe Hintz, 3+ shots tonight. He's hit it in 4 of the last 5. That's +120 on its own, and Star's money line on its own is +100. So I figured if one's going to happen, the other's probably going to happen. A juicy +330. Carter?
All right, we're going to go with the Minnesota Wild, Thrill Kaprizov here. I think I'm going to go with him for 2+ points against the San Jose Sharks. He's got it in 6 straight games against the Sharks. So look for that to continue. The $17 million man, baby, and I'm staying hot with another winner. Let's go, boys.
Hut's gonna wager 17 million on that, maybe. I'm kidding.
Yeah,
Let's wrap up the show with a little bit of garbage time. Always good to get a couple of viral moments out of the Hall of Fame speeches. You mentioned McGillney and his shot of vodka line that I loved, but a very funny slip of the tongue from the commissioner, Gary Bettman.
Played, and that's what Duncan and Z, Alexander and Jumbo, not Dumbo. Sorry, Jumbo. Jen and Brianna, and
I honestly, Duncan Keith and Joe Thornton didn't laugh that hard at that slip up, and I thought maybe they would.
Well, I guess it's just funny because it's the moment, right? You're in this important moment that happens. But if there's a guy to do it to, I'll let you tell you it's Joe Thornton. Like I think it'd be water off a duck's back, the amount of stuff that guy's dealt with and the humor he's seen in it. But it was a little bit of a ball drop there by Gary Bettman and at Jumbo's expense. But I think he bounced back strong from it.
Hey, well, I can understand. Like as you watch it, knowing what he says, you can see how he gets there because he's like, oh, Duncan and Zdeno, and he's got to say all those D sounds. So, I mean, I'll cut Gary some slack there as well. We've all had a slip up or two in front of the mic. All right, that is a wrap on today's edition of the show. Tomorrow, Steve Peters, the film room, going to give us a breakdown on the Oilers and their 5-on-5 struggles, and we'll break down what's a surprisingly busy night in the NHL here on a Tuesday. So all that coming tomorrow at noon Eastern. We'll chat with you then. Hey, hockey fans, if you enjoyed that video, then make sure you hit the subscribe button right here on the Daily Faceoff YouTube. We have you covered for everything you need. Exclusive interviews on The Sheet with Jeff Marek, all the latest hockey news on Daily Faceoff Live, and you can always get your morning started with Johnny Lazarus and Colby Cohn on Morning Cup of Hockey. Don't miss a minute. Hit that subscribe button.